Hello everyone, happy holidays. Marco Collective Gamer 77 here. Welcome back to the channel, and today we'll be doing the fourth game in the King of Fighters series, King of Fighters 1997. A quick overview of this game. This of course is the conclusion of the Orochi saga, and it was quite a bit of fun to play. And as I mentioned in my previous video for King of Fighters 96, while definitely not one of the more balanced games, as SNK was rushing through the King of Fighters 96 development, redrawn graphics for both the stages and the characters, and definitely easily King of Fighters 96 has one of the best soundtracks of all time. King of Fighters 97 is definitely a more balanced game since they didn't have to redo a lot of the graphics that were redone in 96. They did, of course, make some changes in regards to some of the audio aesthetics in regards to how music works in the game. And to be honest, I do prefer the way 96 does it, where there's a song on every round of every stage. There are times in 97 where there's really it's just ambiance and there's the atmosphere of the local quote unquote stage, and there's really no music. As I mentioned, since SNK didn't have to, really redraw any of the new sprites like they did in 1996, there was definitely more attention paid in regards to the gameplay itself. You do, of course, lose a few characters: Vice, Mature, Geese Howard, Wolfgang Krauser, Kasumi Toto, Mr. Big are gone, but in their place you do gain Blue Mary, Ryuji Yamazaki, Billy Kane, Chizaru Kagura, Chris Yashiro, Shermie, and of course Shingo Yabuki. Now, Shingo is a little bit of a kind of a jokey character. He's basically a fellow classmate that idolizes Kyo Kusanagi and copies a lot of the style that, of course, Kyo is known for. He's actually pretty fun to play because since he is a bit similar to Kyo, he just, of course, doesn't have the same powers that Kyo has. Both Kyo's line and Yori Yagami's line have the magical flames on either end. Of course, as I mentioned, Chris, Yashiro, and Shermie are one of the new teams that was released, and they are actually part of the clan Gonitz. Chris focuses a lot on kicks and combos. Yashiro definitely has power and a weird kind of, I guess, gymnastic move where he's looks like he's in a pommel horse swinging his legs around, but he's actually doing that on the ground. The other characters are more of a grappler. Shermie is definitely a grappler in this game. Uh, as I mentioned, there have been some changes from King of Fighters 96, and I think SNK did a good job in really focusing and balance the rest of the game, really kind of balancing the both the ebb and flow of the offense and defense needed in the game. And as I mentioned, since they didn't have to redraw any sprites or draw any new sprites as far as some of the older characters, they were more balanced in gameplay. That doesn't mean they didn't really add in new things. A lot of the boss versions of each character actually have different moves and animations. So like, for example, Yori has a version that you'll see in the video a little bit later where you've got basically the Orochi blood taking over Yori Yagami. One of the bigger departures, you can actually choose between extra or advanced mode here in King of Fighters 1997. Extra is pretty similar to King of Fighters 95 and its predecessor 94. It's a bit more towards defensive play. You get pretty much one power gauge, and of course you can't run. You can of course sidestep attacks. You can also perform unlimited super moves once your energy is flashing red, while the advanced mode gives you the evasive roll that was introduced in King of Fighters 96, and you can also store up to 3 different power gauges at once. So that way you can of course choose to either expend one to get a boost in activating max mode, or basically just rack them up to save when needed. I'm more of the style that like to save when I need them, just in case I need to use a desperation move. And of course, using the gauge also lets you use a even more superior version of your special move without having to wait for your life to flash. You can also use a gauge to quickly get out of an attack after successfully blocking it, in a way almost like an alpha counter, but you're not actually doing a counter hit to your opponent. You're basically blocking their attack, and almost immediately you actually roll away. The rest of the mechanics that 1996 had, like short hops, things of that nature, are still back. There's definitely a lot more thought out with the characters in regards to some of the character relationships. As for example, a lot of your power gauges still carry over to the next character. And without being a programmer, I honestly can't tell if they made huge changes to the code, but King of Fighters 1997 does feel a bit more responsive and crisp versus, say, 96, 95, and 1994. It still plays really well as far as the previous games. As I mentioned, 96 was still one of my favorite, but it does feel like a lot of the combos are a little easier to kind of pull off. I don't know, maybe if they change the buffering of the moves and things of that nature. Canceling from one move to another is a little bit easier. And again, also what I mentioned earlier, there are some decent tracks in 1997, but it's definitely not as strong as 1996. Only because, again, not every stage and every round has music. There are going to be some characters on some stages where literally it's just atmospheric music, like whatever might be gone in the ambient tracks. I personally am not a fan of that. I do prefer having actually either stage specific or character specific music playing while I fight. And all the way back in 1997, when the game was released for the arcade, MVS, home AES, Neo Geo CD, and of course even came on the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn. Again, the Sega Saturn was the better version, especially since it did come with a 1 megabyte RAM card that really helped with load times, giving it that extra RAM to store those games and graphics. In fact, since King of Fighters 96 was definitely quite a huge improvement over 1994 and 1995, there was quite a fervor created, especially in Japan, in regards to the upcoming King of Fighters 97, that SK actually was listening to its fans, and Weekly Famitsu and GameEst and a couple of other magazine publications in Japan actually had readers vote to see who they'd want to see back for King of Fighters 97. And after SNK reading through and looking at the polls, they created the new team, which basically had Chris, who does use fire a lot like Kyo Kusanagi, uh, Shermie, who uses lightning a lot like Benimaru Nikaido, and Yashiro is a big kind of a brawler guy with a lot of power, much like Goro, but a bit faster. Um, I don't want to spoil anything, but of course, one of the last bosses comes from one of these three team members. One of the bigger surprises in the game was actually to fight Yori and then watch him become Orochi mode Yori. So that was pretty cool and definitely quite a surprise when playing this in the arcade. I believe this was even before Overiew was introduced into the Street Fighter series. And as indicated earlier, you can actually activate max mode while you're in the more kind of advanced mode, where it's a bit more of an aggressive tactic and gameplay, much like King of Fighters 96. You can actually turn on max mode, and basically what you could do, it grants extra damage to your attacks. You basically get a little less damage from what you receive from your opponents, but of course there is a timer that counts down when the gauge actually reduces itself, and at that point you can also do your special move and becomes a super desperation move with almost twice the damage of a normal version of the move. And one little tidbit in the game itself, much like its previous iteration, you can actually have a social relations in regards to how good each team member are with each other. So, for example, at the order select screen, if you hold down the start button, you'll see kind of smile icons that basically represent and show the relationships between the partners. So the icons identify how power stocks are affected, if you're using advanced mode, if your teammate will call you by doing a backup attack, and that'll be both in the advanced and extra modes. Of course, the icons do nothing to affect your power gauge or your stock meter, but if they're happy, basically the characters are in friendly terms and an extra stock is awarded. If they're neutrals, they're kind of cold to each other. And if they're angry, they despise each other, and actually one stock is removed when when the current character dies and the next character comes. And of course, as I mentioned, the roster did get some changes. So one of the first ones is Yashiro Nanakase. Then of course you have Shermie and Chris as part of the new Faces team. Ryuji Yamazaki from Fatal Fury series enters as Billy Kane leaves. Blue Mary from the Fatal Fury series comes in. Shingo Yabuki, also again as I mentioned, a fan of Kyo Kusanagi. Orochi Yori is the mid boss. There's also Orochi Leona, which I forgot to mention. Orochi, the main boss itself, comes near the end of the game. With that, of course, the team standings are as follows. The hero team, which can be known as the Japanese team as well, has Kyo Kusanagi, Benimaru Nikaido, and Goro Diamond. The Fatal Fury team, of course, Terry and Andy Bogard, along with Joe Higashi. The Art of Fighting team with Ryo Sakazaki, Robert Garcia, and Yuri Sakazaki. We've got the Ikari Warriors team returning again this year with Leona Hydern, Ralph Jones, and Clark Still. Psychic Soldier team, still the same as always, Athena Asimiya, Sei Kensu, and Shin Getsai. With the women's fighting team with Chizuru Kagura, which was introduced in 1996, Mai Shiranui, and King. You've got the Korea Justice team with Kim Kapwan, Chang Kohan, and Choi Bonji. And as I mentioned already, the new Faces team. You do also have a special team with Yuri, Blue Mary, and Billy Kane. And stages time around, not quite as many. You've got Bali, Indonesia, Kowloon in Hong Kong, Nishinomiya in Japan, Seoul, South Korea, a New York State stage, Monte Carlo in Monaco. And then, of course, you got some boss stages, literally called bossu, or all the normal boss stages. The mid boss stages, when you're facing either the awakened Orochi team, is on the altar of Orochi's Heavenly Kings. And then at the very end, you've got the altar of Orochi, where you'll be fighting Orochi himself. This is the first game in this series to actually have a section after the final boss. So if you as a player are using the hero team, you will fight Yori Yagami as Kyo Kusanagi after or defeating Orochi. It is going to be a 1v1 fight in the regular arcade mode. Of course, besides King of Fighters 97 coming on the PlayStation and Sega Saturn, the King of Fighters R1 was actually a remake also released on the Neo Geo Pocket as well. You can now, of course, also get this on the PS4/PC as King of Fighters 97 Reboot with redone netcode as well, which is quite handy to play this game online. It also is, of course, available on the Nintendo Switch and Microsoft Xbox via the ACA or Hamster Corporation for $7.99, and also one of those titles that often go on sale. I'm honestly hoping, much like the other kind of recent reviews that I've had, that this will be released on the II Arcade, only because next year II Arcade has promised to have all of the games to be online multiplayer compatible, and being able to support and purchase legal versions of the game, even if they are just digital, is something I definitely do. Even especially at $7.99 or less when it's on sale, I think it's quite a steal. You're definitely getting quite a deal for the price of basically like a large frappuccino with extra shots of coffee. to get a lot of extra gameplay and easily hours and hours of time in order to really get to know your characters. Fortunately, once you go from one to the other, you get to kind of get the pacing of the teams that you favor. So, for example, my favorite teams are the Art of Fighting and Fatal Fury teams, but everybody is different and have the folks they like to use. Overall, as a summary, King of Fighters 97 plays very well. Again, it is definitely a better balanced game than King of Fighters 96, but still, in my heart, even though this game does play a bit better, controls feel a bit tighter. It's easier to do cancels out of super moves. They did, of course, add the advanced and extra modes. So, gameplay wise, it is definitely better than 96, but I think just the overall feeling for me as far as the music, of course, I think 96 is still better. Graphics, honestly, they use a lot of what was redrawn from 1996, which is why 1996 King of Fighters was more unbalanced, since a lot of that development time was done in order to redraw a lot of the characters. Introducing the new teams this year was pretty nice. It was nice to be able to use some different characters. Definitely keeps the game kind of fresh. This game does, of course, end the Orochi saga. You can pick it up as a collection. It's actually available on the PS4, which is, of course, compatible with your PS5. I think they even released the Vita version, or is it PSP version? Goodness, way back in the day. So if you could still, I think right now, still purchase that on the Sony PlayStation Network. I think they're going to be canceling the PS3 and PS Vita online section soon. But if you are picking up more currently, I would recommend picking up for the Switch. Again, only because you can take it anywhere with you. As far as online, I do prefer the either PC via Steam, or you can also pick it up on Sony PlayStation for the King of Fighters 97 Reboot version, which does have the kind of rebalanced games, updated netcode, so easily worth the buy. Now, would I prefer to purchase 97 versus 96 or 98? If I only had to choose one, I would still choose 96, but again, as I mentioned in my previous King of Fighters 96 overview, I have particular reasons for that. If I had to choose between 97 and 98, I would choose King of Fighters 98 because it is definitely more of a dream match. There's a lot of characters that return. A lot of the stages have more music. So while 97 plays well, I still like 96 or 98 better. That said, if I only had to choose, or if you only had to pick one King of Fighters, if you prefer the old style kind of look and play, I would say go with King of Fighters 98 Dream Match Never Ends. However, if you want the overall just plethora of rosters, and as far as characters, stages, etc., that combines both some of the older characters and some of the characters released in the 2000 versions of the series, King of Fighters 2002 Ultimate Match, especially with the newly released redone netcode, is definitely a good buy as well. So hard to go wrong with any of these titles. You definitely will easily get your money's worth back. So here is my overview of King of Fighters 97. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and also comment for any other games that you'd like to have me review or do an overview on for both either the Neo Geo or even the Capcom version. I do produce Capcom overviews as well. So, thanks for watching. Hope everyone has a wonderful and happy upcoming holiday. I will be doing King of Fighters 98, but most likely won't be releasing it until the day after Christmas, of course, since next Saturday is Christmas Day. So, thanks everyone, and God bless.